kids. Stop watching Office Space and listen up. It's time for another stellar edition of .NET Rocks, the internet audio talk show for .NET developers with Carl Franklin and Rory Blythe. This is Karen Cavallero here to announce show number 57 with guest Markus Egger, recorded live Friday, March 26, 2004. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net, training developers to work smarter, and now offering hands-on VB.NET and ASP.NET classes remotely. Online at www.franklins.net. And by Data Dynamics, makers of ActiveReports.net. Simple, powerful, and cost-effective reporting for Windows Forms and ASP.NET web applications. Online at www.datadynamics.com. Support is also provided by Code Magazine, Microsoft Technologies in-depth for IT managers and developers. Online at www.code-magazine.com. And now, the man known in small circles as Hell's Boy's real trainer, Carl Franklin.
Thanks. All right. Welcome to another stellar edition of .NET Rocks. This is Carl here in New London with my partner in crime, my compadre, Mr. Rory. That's right. I'm here. Never mind that. And Rory, what's up, man?
Hi.
Mr. Teapot. The live listeners got a chance to hear Rory sing not only I'm a Little Teapot, but a Tom Jones tune.
A partial verse of Tom Jones's everlasting hit Sex Bomb.
So, you know, if you really want to hear the real fun stuff, you got to tune in live. And we do this show live every Friday at noon Eastern Time. So, what's been happening this week, man?
Well, I started working this week at a company. I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to say. It was one of those weeks where I signed a lot of papers.
Yeah.
And
we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, you just don't have time to read all that stuff.
Company.
So you just figure company. Yeah, so I work for company right now as a contractor. Got started there, doing a lot of .NET stuff. That's been pretty cool. And I also moved into my apartment. That's really nice. Yeah. I mean, what I'm getting here for $800 a month, I could never get back in Portland.
Yeah.
Not in a million years. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I've got a view of your office from my apartment.
Right. And a few of the, the street people, and
yeah,
and the vertical SR-71.
And I can hear the occasional scream coming from down below in the streets, but I mean, it's not that bad.
But it's a happy scream. It's a scream of joy.
Yeah. Take my wallet. Woo!
Come on, no, we run a clean city here. Well, anyway, I saw this on the web. I just wanted to read it. It's a news item. Microsoft to remove the calculator from Windows. News from Repo. The country Repo threatens Microsoft to pay a fine as much as 10% of its global annual sales for monopoly defenses. The software giant is abusing its monopoly power by bundling several applications such as the calculator and Paint with Windows. The process against Microsoft was started by the company named Nisbum. Nisbum developed a great calculator, but doesn't see the chance to sell this great product to the masses as long as Microsoft bundles the calculator with Windows. According to Repo, Microsoft must offer at least two separate versions of Windows, one without the calculator. Repo is giving Microsoft a last opportunity to comment before the case is concluded.
Are you serious?
No.
Okay, thank God. Oh, my God.
It was satire that became a real topic, of a hot topic on Christian Nagel's OneNotes weblog at weblogs.asp.net/cnagel. And people had that reaction. They just couldn't believe it. They thought it was, and it turns out to be satire.
Yeah.
So,
because I would have freaked out if that had been a real sort of thing. Yeah,
I could see that happening.
Yeah.
I mean, how far will you go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what, Rory? Our old pal Mark Dunn, I was chatting with him last night, and he sent me an email. He wanted to drop by, and he couldn't call in because he's actually in a meeting today.
Okay.
But he did offer us this greeting and a story. Hey, Carl and Rory, I have to say that I'm thoroughly enjoying listening to you two on .NET Rocks. You really, really have me excited. That's pretty good coming from him. I mean, Takes a lot to excite Mark. You know?
Are you hiked up higher than a prom dress in June?
Carl, you couldn't have picked a better replacement for me than Rory. He's great, and the show is definitely getting better all the time.
Oh, stop it. Stop it.
I wanted to lay this story on you to reinforce what our listeners already know, that .NET does indeed rock. So I'm teaching a custom ADO.NET class for 3 days this week to 2 guys from a military client. Turns out both of them absolutely hate Microsoft.
Wow.
They could care less about the course material, and they told me they had to learn ADO.NET because their boss, quote, had his head up his ass, end quote. Rough crowd. Well, by midday Wednesday, I had them just about turned around. I took an approach of not arguing with them. In fact, I sort of agreed with many of their Java arguments. I kept hitting them with the architecture of .NET and how well it positions Microsoft to compete in the future. I asked them if they were military lifers or if they had ideas about entering the private sector at some point. Anyway, both are big .NET fans now and can't wait to start their new project. Mark,
cool.
How cool is that?
That is really cool. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a testament not only to .NET but to Mark's great teaching skills. So as you know, this is the time when we read email, not just from previous co-hosts, but from the masses. And we like to do this to give away some swag. We got plenty of swag to give away. And today we're going to be giving away .NET Rocks clocks. That's a real clock, an analog clock, not a digital clock, but a analog clock with a clock face. And it's about, 9 or 10 inches in diameter. And has our ugly mugs on it. That's the only
Not
defect.
.NET Rocks mugs, but he means our faces. There aren't like 2 mugs pasted on the front of the clock. Right? That's slang for picture.
Yeah, that's East Coast slang. Yeah, shut your mug, see? Yeah. So this one comes from Michael Peltz. He says, howdy, I stumbled across .NET Rocks a couple weeks ago. You guys are great. You were the straw that broke the camel's back to motivate me to get high-speed web access. All right, so if we're the final straw that broke, man, you have been holding out for a long time.
We should be getting kickbacks too.
We should be.
From the high-speed internet companies.
I mean, if this is what it takes to get you to go to DSL or cable, man, I would. Anyway, you have no life. But anyway, I wanted to give you some feedback on the VB videos. Oh, the videos that we've been doing, the how-to videos. They're great. That's the feedback. Keep up the good work.
That's good feedback, I guess. Yeah.
Michael, congratulations.
Good to hear.
Own a .NET Rocks clock. Chris Podmore says, hi, guys. Thought I would drop you a quick line and see if I can't win myself a .NET Rocks coffee mug. Well, sorry, Chris, but we're giving out clocks today, so you get a clock. Seriously, thanks for last week's show with John Box and Dan Fox. It was excellent. I haven't done much with the compact framework yet. Our current offering is in embedded VB. And as you said on the show last week, you've done some embedded VB. And
done some embedded
hope you
VB.
never have to do any more again.
The compact framework is nice.
Much nicer. I look forward to rewriting it for the compact framework. A big thanks to Rory about holding vector points instead of bitmaps. Our product certainly saves signatures as bitmaps, but I will give Rory's idea a try once we do the rewrite.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work. I can't wait for my next fix of .NET Rocks. It's like crack,
right?
You know?
Yeah, I can see him kind of smacking the arm with the fingers, getting ready to tie it on, and
the first one's free.
Yeah, right.
Okay, this comes from Matt Swift, who's in the UK, and I think Chris Padmore is also in the UK, wasn't he? Yeah, we have a lot of listeners across the pond. We're in actually over 50 countries. Did you know that?
I did not know that. That's a lot of countries.
Yeah, we have a lot of countries out there listening to us. A lot of people in a lot of countries. Okay, so Matt Swift says, hey guys, I'm a .NET developer in the UK. I graduated last year, and so this is my first real work. I had no experience of .NET and had been trained using Java, some C++, and some really old but cool stuff like Pascal. Really old. Man. Now it's just me who feels really old. So I guess I was lucky that I got a chance to learn about .NET. I'd never really thought about it, but now I'm using it. I think it's totally awesome. I call it a programmer's paradise. Not to confuse that with the company Programmer's Paradise. But it really is. I really want to say that what you guys do is great. Show hosts Carl and Rory give out great info, have some great guests, and inject a massive dose of hilarity into the whole thing. maybe there's a lot of people out there who wouldn't appreciate all the humor that goes into the show. But I'd say,
there are. Yeah.
But I'd say that any developer can't help but laugh their ass off at some of the conversations and features you guys come up with. He goes on to basically praise and kiss our butts, and that's good enough for us.
Thank
man.
you very much.
Definitely good enough. This one is from Lars Larson. I don't know where he's from, but he says, "Hey, Carl. At one time back in 1999-2000, I was a fairly happy dude. I was teaching VB and SQL 7 to classes of eager students from Sacramento to Phoenix at nearly $1,000 a day. Those were the days. Then all of a sudden it stopped, and I was back to being a plain old DBA. .NET, therefore, kind of took me by surprise, and I'm now in a new position and hoping to ramp myself up. I want to tell you, Ben, your show has been an almost daily meal for me. I'm very impressed with the presentation and feel. I just now listened and watched the little demo you and Rory did about objects in .NET. The little demo. Where we were talking about that little word. Although I understood it before I began to listen, I love the analogies you used, being an analogy smith myself, and look forward to more from you too. My new job places me in an interesting place. My main responsibilities focus on the Solomon financial package and its customization. Not much .NET going on there, but I'm also tasked to get up to speed on Microsoft CRM and Business Portal, both of which are built upon the .NET framework. In time, there may be an opportunity for me to attend your course either on-site or remotely. I just wanted to let you know how well I think you are doing. This may in fact be as close to a fan letter that I have ever written in my life, and I must say that I'm a bit embarrassed, but what the hell? You rock! 5 exclamation points. All right, a final letter comes from Giuseppe, who's writing from Bologna in Italy. I am a C# guy who plays the role of evangelist inside our tiny development team. I earned this position because I love programming languages, and I had some experience with Java, Perl, VB, and C. Today, I prefer the .NET framework. over J2EE. I'm not really interested in the religion war between C#, VBNet, and Java because I appreciate the internal coerenza of .NET framework. Sorry, I should say consistency, but I would like to hear the word coerenza from your mouths, and I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. It's Coerenza. Coerenza, I'm thinking.
Coerenza.
Coerenza.
I don't actually know. Yeah.
Maybe it's a enza.
Enza.
By the way, I emailed him back and asked for a phonetic spelling, but apparently he had gone to bed because some people sleep, I've heard. Inconsistency is one of the hardest features to find in software, and it is the one that I appreciate a lot. And now, a semi-technical thought I would like to share with you and your listeners. When I saw the demo of Microsoft Longhorn held in Milan 2 months ago, that day there were stellar speakers like David Chappell, Lester Madden, Clemens Vasters, Hans Vierbeck, and Nigel Watling. I was happy to go back to my happy days when I used to play with Apple HyperCard. The feature that pushed me into the past was navigable application. In my opinion, Apple HyperCard was an extraordinary piece of software that brought to the Mac users a visual IDE, a scripting language with hypertext features, and the stack metaphor in building applications. And the stack metaphor resembles a lot the concept behind navigable application. Quality ideas never go out of style. What about a stellar .NET Rocks edition about the good ideas that Apple, as a software house, brought into the developer's universe?
That'd be interesting.
It would be interesting. Yeah. You know, Scoble really digs the Mac, too, and I never really got into it.
I've got my PowerBook.
But, yeah, Steve would be proud. Although, we won't let Steve Jobs read your blog.
I say good things about Apple, but I'm pretty critical.
Yeah.
You know.
Thank you a lot for your talk show. It is my weekly drug, and I put at least 2 show tablets in my MP3 player when I go biking.
What is this drug theme? Is there going to be like a .NET Rocks Anonymous?
It's happened before. I mean, it really has. People compare us to crack all the time.
That's kind of freaky.
Yes, it's not good. Well, we have come to the point. Let me say that again. Well, we have come to the place in our show where we like to do a little segment we call the Google Weirdos.
Weirdos. Weirdos.
So, Rory, what is Google Weirdos?
Well, regular listeners are probably sick and tired of hearing the explanation, but Google Weirdos, all right, I run a site called neopolian.com, and I go through my logs regularly, and I like to take a look at how people are getting to my site. So I look at all the Google searches that have come through in the referrals, and I like to find the strangest ones and put them together for this little segment we call Google Weirdos. And it's kind of exciting because a lot of the stuff that people are jamming through Google is just totally out of this world weird stuff. Sometimes it's not so weird, and I'll add my own commentary to spice it up a bit, like this week. And sometimes it's just completely nuts, like last week. The other thing that's happening is people are starting to contact me through Google Weirdos now. They're using it as a sort of cheap one-way email system. So what I like to do is I first read the messages that people have sent to me through Google, and then I move on to the actual searches. And a lot of the searches obviously were not intended to land at my site, so it's pretty cool. So the first shout out to Rory through Google is "You are the only Rory for me," and that was actually a campaign set up by I'm gonna ruin this name, but Aaron Weicker. Waker, it's something like that. AaronWeiker.com. His site's not up right now. Don't know what happened, but he was getting his readers to punch that into Google, which is pretty cool. Next one is Rory is a beer drinking, assimilated Kool-Aid drinking, and homeless mocha frappuccino latte macchiato. Can't believe I was able to say that. I don't know what that means, but I guess it's an insult. So whatever. Next one is Rory Blythe hates Linux. You might like to tell that to Jeff, who just gave me a shell account on his system, his Debian system. I don't hate it, but it's good to know what's going on in that world.
Yeah, in fact, you think it's pretty cool. I mean, if you're like me, I think it's cool.
Well, I like it, and I've said this before, I like it the same way my grandfather likes his boat, right? He likes it better when it's at the side of his house than when it's actually in the water. He likes to tinker. It bothers him when the thing is actually working. And for me, Linux provides a challenge, a technical challenge that other well-put-together OSs like Windows and OS X don't provide. I mean, it's a struggle just to keep the thing up and running for me sometimes.
Right.
And the hate mail will flow. So next one is Rory Thingy Foundation. It's pretty cool. I'm out there. I'm out there in the charitable world doing my part for spreading awareness of the thingy, whatever that is. And some people don't seem to like Rory Blythe very much because the next search is Rory Blythe sucks ass.
Oh.
It's obviously about a different Rory Blythe, though, right? I mean, there's tons of them out there. Not about me. And last shout out to me through Google is Rory Blythe. I'm at a VB.NET shop and I'm having C# withdrawals. I feel your pain, my friend, but you know what I saw Chris Sells do once when he had to code in VB.NET for a demo? At the end of all of his VB.NET lines, for example, if it were an if statement, he would put the tick for the comment, and then right after the tick, he'd put a curly brace. So you can go ahead and stick in your curly braces after ticks and stick your semicolons in after ticks so you can make your VB.NET look at least a little bit like C#. That'll make you feel better. So now we move on to the actual searches.
Right. These are the fun. I love these.
I don't know how these get to. Yeah, I got to read the other ones because it's cool. It's like my own little portion of fan mail and also Rory Blythe sucks ass mail. So these are the actual searches, and I don't know how this first one got to my site at all. Sweaty Adam, who's Sweaty Adam? What kind of weird stuff is that? And how to get to my site? Next one, Thailand Robert Scoble pornography. I like that. Hey man. Scoble, is there something you forgot to blog about? Take a trip recently? Be interesting to hear about that.
Truly weird.
Well, what is this person looking for? They obviously had some idea, right? I mean, Robert Scoble, that is not vague.
No, it's absolutely
they
in Thailand.
To find something. Yeah, Thailand pornography.
They want to find, porn of Robert Scoble in Thailand,
Who doesn't? So next one is Comcast support phone number. And that on its own is really funny. If you ever tried to deal with Comcast tech support, I don't even need to add anything to that. It's like an oxymoron, Comcast support phone number. Yeah. Next one is My Girlfriend Naked. All I have to say is that if you're searching for this, it probably means that photos of her are out there on the web, right? And you're going to have some explaining to do if she ever finds them. So good luck with that, my friend.
Where did I put those naked pictures of my girlfriend? Let me Google them.
The next one is about Firefox, which is the new name for the stripped-down version of the Mozilla browser formerly known as Firebird, which has probably gone through like 50 name changes. And it's Firefox browser and safety. Like you're afraid it's going to leap out of your computer and go for your jugular and rip it out. And I don't know what the safety thing's about there.
Jeez.
Got another one. Proctologist in New Jersey. See, that's not that funny, but how did it wind up on my blog? You know, that's some messed up stuff right there. Why are people getting my blog with a search for New Jersey proctologists? I don't represent them.
That, you know, what can you say about that? I mean,
it says more about me, I guess. Larry Ellison bastard. And right on, brother. Yeah, I do agree with that. Here's another good one. I have no idea what this is. Monkey meep. The word monkey followed by the word meep. M-E-E-P. Monkey meep. You know, and what the hell is that? You know, it almost sounds, I mean, monkey meep. Monkey meep. Monkey meep.
It's a mantra. It's a Zen mantra.
I was actually thinking it almost sounded like a dessert topping or something, you know? Like, hey, does anybody want ice cream? Yeah, but don't forget the monkey meep. Get a nice dollop of monkey meep on the top. I don't know what it is, monkey meep. Anyway, somebody found it at my site, I guess.
Oh, man.
Here's another one that's not so funny on its own, but is interesting when you put it in perspective. I need to know some background info about a company called Walgreens. See, I like these because of the way
That's a sentence.
I like the way they're phrased, though, because it seems like whoever's doing the search thinks that he's talking to the computer of the future. Computer,
Right.
give me all the information you have on the company called Walgreens. Names, dates, major events with a focus on wartime activities. Go now. Like it's just supposed to come back with this huge printout of results that it finds.
Someday people are going to refer to this episode as, remember when we thought this was science fiction?
Right. Monkey meep and...
Yeah. Remember when Monkey Meat was just a gleam in Rory's eye?
No, it's everywhere, yeah.
And does that conclude the Google Weirdos?
No.
Okay.
We got another one, world's smallest freezer, which I think is Scott McNeely's heart.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Burn.
Ouch.
And then the last one is how to tell a horse's age. And I always thought you just cut them in half and counted the rings, but maybe somebody else knows better than I do. So that's Google Weirdos for the week. It's not always as weird, you know, than it was the week before, but whatever.
Google Weirdos.
Well, Rory, before we introduce our guest, I'd like to announce that Microsoft has generously donated a free pass to TechEd 2004 for us to give away.
Sweet.
Yeah. So one of the lucky listeners out there is going to win a free pass. Now, TechEd 2004 is in May,
Uh-huh.
and it's in San Diego.
All right.
Yours truly is speaking there, and we're also doing a couple of different sessions there as .NET Rocks that we're going to record and then pull pieces of, and that's going to be part of an upcoming show after TechEd.
Yeah, so come and find us if you're going to be there.
Definitely, if you're going to TechEd, come and find us. We're doing two things. We're doing a .NET Rocks session in the Cabana, and we're doing a .NET Rocks session as a iNeta BOF session, a Birds of a Feather session. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give away clues, and we're going to give away one clue every week from now until the end of April. And those clues are going to be ways in which you can find a word. And you're going to put all those words together to make a sentence. And then at the end of April, if you've got the right sentence, well, even if you don't, if you think you have the right sentence, you send that sentence to us through the website, which we will, we'll have all this stuff up. And from those people who get it right, we're going to do a drawing. Sounds good?
Sounds good. I'm glad I don't have to play. It sounds hard, but that's what it is. It's a high price ticket item. This is a big prize.
Yeah, this isn't just a box. This is a very, very expensive ticket.
Yeah.
And TechEd, if you haven't ever gone, this is Microsoft's party, basically, right?
Cabana.
Cabana. There's going to be sand and booze. I mean, let's all right. So, Rory, our guest today is none other than the one and only Markus Egger from EPS Software, and he is of Code Magazine and EPS Software. He's the president and chief software architect of EPS, and they are a custom development and consulting firm located in Houston, Texas. He specializes in consulting for object-oriented development, internet development, B2B, and web services. EPS does most of its development using Microsoft Visual Studio.net. EPS has worked on numerous software projects for Fortune 500 companies, including Philip Morris, Qualcomm, Shell, and Microsoft. And he's also worked as a contractor for the Microsoft Visual Studio team. where he is mostly responsible for object modeling and other OOP and component-related technologies. He's an international speaker, having presented sessions at numerous conferences, including a number of conferences in North America and Europe. And, you know, the amazing resume goes on and on and on. If you want to read more, go to the website. Markus, how are you doing, sir?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Great.
Doing all right, too, yeah.
Excellent.
So where are you now?
At this very moment, I'm actually in San Jose, California. And coincidentally, I'm visiting the Game Developer Conference right now.
Oh, cool.
Despite the fact that I'm not a game developer, but hey, what the heck.
What are you doing out there?
Vacation or?
Well, the show is relatively interesting for us because as a developer magazine, whenever 10,000 software developers get together,
Yeah.
of course, we have some interest in that. So I have that excuse to come here. Partially, I'm also just plain interested in it myself as kind of a, you know, what cool stuff is coming down the graphics pipeline, for instance.
You always seem to be, to me, on the cutting edge of cool in terms of the stuff that you've been working on developer-wise. You really got heavy into tablet PC development and Windows Forms, objects, and visual inheritance. And, I don't know, you always seem to be sort of on doing that high-tech stuff.
You know, it's pretty cool. It's my passion, so it's pretty cool to be able to do all this stuff and actually call it a job.
And people are probably asking, you know, where do you come from? Where are your roots, European-wise?
So what are you saying? You're saying I'm having an accent?
No. Well, it's definitely
We
not
have
a
the
Texas
accent,
drawl.
all right?
It's definitely not a Texas drawl, Markus.
That's right. I live in Texas right now, but I'm originally from Austria, Central Europe. For those who don't know, Mozart's birthplace.
So
the city of Salzburg.
The actual city where Mozart was born.
I'm not actually right in the city. I'm about 30-45 minutes into the mountains, center of skiing, center of tourism type of place. But of course,
now I'm
probably closer to the city of Salzburg than I'm closer to the center of Houston right now, despite the fact that I claim to live in Houston.
You say I'm there. Do you have family there still? Did you grow up there? What's the?
Well, I grew up there, and I've really only lived in the U.S. for the last maybe 4 or 5 years or something like that.
Wow.
Although before that, I have been traveling back and forth between Europe and the U.S. quite a bit when I did quite a number of projects here. But yeah, I still have strong roots in Europe, and I do go back to Austria 3-4 times a year or something like that, and in fact still have a place there. So kind of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah. I've never been to Salzburg. Do they have Mozart Day?
We don't have Mozart Day, but you can walk through the old town of Salzburg, which is the happening place.
Right,
so
I've heard it's very charming, very a lot of castles and fairy tale looking.
Yep. In fact, the center of town is the big castle, which is what the town is named after. Salzburg means salt castle. So
oh wow,
huge fortress in the center of town, and as you walk around, you'll be in front of Mozart's birth house or stuff like that, which we never really noticed, but every time I bring somebody there, it's like, that actually is pretty cool. So
the suffix "berg" means castle, literally?
That means castle, yeah.
So like Hamburg, Germany is Ham Castle? And Pittsburgh is the Pitts Castle? Or
I guess so, yeah.
I never thought of that. That's pretty cool. So what do you want to talk about first? The object stuff you've been doing in Windows Forms or tablet PC? Or you've got a lot of stuff to talk about.
There's a ton of things, really, yeah. So I don't know what the listener might be most interested in.
I think they're interested in everything, really.
Oh, excellent. That gives us a great starting point right there.
Sort of narrows it down for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Theory of relativity, go.
Discuss.
No, I think the whole topic of object-oriented development, in my mind, is a pretty important one.
I agree.
I think it is really the foundation, or at least it should be the foundation of everything we do today, and especially with technologies like Visual Studio.net, where all the languages, including VB.net, now have strong object-oriented features. That's really what makes .NET tick, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's one of the main reasons I never liked VB6 very much, is because it was what I would call object-based, where you definitely work with objects, but it wasn't really object-oriented in terms of having features like inheritance. And
yeah, that was really the key. No
Exactly.
inheritance sort of blows the whole model. It was definitely tacked on, you can tell.
Exactly. And I think now we got the perfect scenario, right? Not only do we have inheritance, but we have cross-language inheritance that
that's
the
so
whole
cool,
framework is based upon. So I'm kind of in, .NET heaven, if you want.
Right. What kinds of things have you done with your? Now I know you've developed at EPS a framework, an application framework that involves, because I've seen it. You've actually demonstrated to me. That involves a lot of Windows Forms. You've created your own versions of the controls in Windows Forms, DLL, and your own forms that are particular to your the kinds of applications that you write. So listeners out there, basically they've got it so that anytime they need to create a particular type of application, it's just, let's start with this base class that has like explorers and master detail lists and all this great stuff. And they just plug them in, bind them the right way, set a few properties, and they're off to the races. I love that. That's so cool.
Yeah, that's basically you've hit the nail on the head there. The framework, or as we call it, the platform, the product is actually a trademarked product or a trademarked name called the Milos Solution Platform. And what we try to do is we basically try to make our own developer life a lot easier. What we do at EPS is we write generally enterprise-level applications or business applications in general, also smaller ones. And we noticed that we do the same thing over and over and over again. I don't think I've written more than one or two applications in my life that didn't have to store name information in some form.
Hey, Marcus, excuse me. I have to tell something to Rory. Rory, system.security.cryptography.
Okie dokie.
Okay, Marcus, go ahead.
Okay, so we decided that since we do the same thing over and over again, we have to find a better approach in order to stay competitive in today's market space. So we decided to totally start over when .NET first became available to us, which was now quite some time ago. And we decided to first build an application framework similar to what Kevin talked about 2 shows ago, where we have all the fundamental pieces in place that we need to build an application, everything from data access to security to automatic updating to Windows Forms to web forms, all those things. And the way we built that is we decided that this was not going to be a product for sale, at least not as a whole, but this was going to be a product that was geared towards the types of applications EPS builds. And we discovered that there's really a number of different applications or types of applications we build even on one platform. Like, we could build a Windows application that looks like Office, or we could build a Windows application that looks more like, Battleship Gray Windows type of stuff. So we built all of these things into our base framework. And the Windows Forms part is a very big part of that, because I believe that Windows Forms applications will become more and more important again. I think web apps are great, and they're here to stay and have a lot of uses. But I think if you have an application that you use 8 hours a day, I'm not convinced that an HTML-based interface is really the best way to go.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And with modern technologies like automatic updates and also web service to get the data remoted, you really can get most of the benefits of a web application out of a Windows app, yet you don't have to get the downsides of it, like the second overhead every time you click on a button. So Windows is a very big part of Milos, but it's not the only part.
Well, also scalability, right? For the desktop apps. I mean, instead of having to put all that processing and all the resource-intensive stuff on the server, you can actually take advantage of the fact that your users have like 9 gigahertz machines on the desktops, which is something we've been ignoring for a long time. We've been just using these high-powered, bits of steel to run, browsers, which is crazy. So moving that back onto the desktop is a good thing. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So if you wanted to, Marcus, if you wanted to do a pretty sophisticated application from scratch these days, it would obviously take you a long time, and you put a lot of time and effort into this framework, which is a good idea even for people. Now, I'd like to just mention that the framework isn't commercially available, but it's a good idea for people to do their own frameworks for their own particular needs. And, what kind of time savings have you seen in projects that you've done? Give me an example of a project that's come up where a customer said, we need to do something, blah, 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 and you've been able to whip it out in a certain amount of time.
It actually totally depends on the type of application we do. Typically at EPS, we tend to do very large applications. We generally try to get applications that run 2 years and require 5 or 10 people to work on them. But really quantity-wise, we do a lot more small projects because for every 2-year project you probably find 10 smaller ones. So we're trying to be competitive in each one of those categories. And we find that on the low end, we are now competitive in a space where we need to turn something around in 2 or 3 weeks or a month that normally would have taken us, maybe 4 or 5 months, because not only do we have these technical objects in our framework, but we also have what we call the business layer. And the business layer allows us to say, okay, we need to store names, and names have multiple phone numbers and multiple addresses, and those are shared across names and all of that type of stuff. And we don't have to start over from scratch because we have basic business objects that take care of names. We have basic UIs that take care of names.
It sounds like a lot of what WinFS is doing with schemas in Longhorn. You're sort of creating these schemas that are specific to things that you use over and over and over again.
That's correct, yeah. But of course, WinFS is mostly about storage, which storage is a big part of what we do, but it's not the only thing we do. So it's also important for us that we have a basic form that looks just like an Outlook contact form, or at least part of it, that has address parsing, all those types of things integrated. Yet at the same time, we never assume, or the basic assumption is that what we have, we will never be able to use as is. So all this stuff is fundamentally architected to be subclassed and changed. But, we can take a name and say, we need to store the listeners of the .NET Rocks radio show. But in addition to what we normally do, we also need to store their .NET Rocks listener number and a bunch of other stuff. And we just subclass from the classes we already have, and we add those fields to it and expose them through the interface. And it's a very quick task. And at the same time, we are reusing all the difficult parts that were already there, like making sure all the crosslinks work and parsing the addresses when we enter them in one big text box rather than in individual fields, if that's what we want to do.
What kind of controls did you create specifically? I mean, we're all developers out here. Let's talk code here for a minute.
Yeah, there's a number of things, but go ahead.
No, that's the question. Just what specific types of controls and what do they do?
Well, there's 2 different things we did. For one, we took all the Windows form controls and we subclassed them. So in other words, if we build an application, we never use a basic Windows Forms text box. Even if what we want is exactly like a regular text box, we still use our subclassed version because that gives us the ability to add more functionality later. And of course, it also gave us the ability to add additional features as a default type of thing. So if we want to do fancy input masking for text box, well, that's not natively supported, but our text box supports it. So we took all the controls, every single one of them that's not sealed in the Windows Forms namespace, and we subclassed them, and that's what we use in our own applications. And it allows us to do things like a little while back, we had a customer who decided that since what they were used to, or at least the managers, I guess, was all uppercase text entry because that's what they did on the mainframes they were used to before. They wanted their Windows app to work the same way.
Yeah, I've seen that too, yeah.
What other enhanced kind of controls? I mean, the text box is, but
so
you've done some really cool
stuff. We did
stuff.
a lot of that, but then we also built entire custom controls. For instance, we really decided that the basic data grid that ships in .NET, if you look at that gives you sore eyeballs. So we decided that we wanted our own data grid. In particular, a read-only data grid that could do what we needed to do in a very performant and very straightforward way. So, for instance, we wanted the ability for the grid to look just like the grid in Outlook, and we wanted to have categories, and we wanted to have the same look and feel, but we wanted to be extremely flexible. For instance, we wanted totally flexible row height. We wanted to be able to say, okay, we are rendering a group header, and the group header, this is the group that lists certain issues of Code magazine, so we want to see the issue, the cover of that magazine in the group header, and at the same time we want to see a little graph that shows us the reader distribution of this particular issue, and we want all of that in the grid header. Well, if you want something like that, then a lot of the grids out there will probably not help you to do that. And of course, now I'm probably offending one third-party vendor that has a grid that does just that. But
somebody mentioned Janus Systems.
Janus Systems is actually a very good grid, yeah. And actually, the grid we have is kind of like a fundamental grid that we use all over the place, but it's also not the only grid that we use. We actually use a number of third-party vendors that have very good grids in certain areas. You mentioned Janus, and Janus is one of the ones we use.
Component One has good stuff for Windows Forms, too.
And there's a number of other vendors out there. I don't want to go into the game of mentioning any particular names because we'd be pissing off Cope Magazine advertisers.
Right, we don't want to do that. They're all good. But you make up your own mind.
Yeah. But we decided to build something like that grid. Or another thing we built is a simple control that could take a simplified version of HTML, like paragraphs, images, bold, italic, underlined, hyperlinks, those types of things. And we built a very, very lightweight control that can display this type of text. And that allows us to deploy something that's very lightweight, very performant for those instances where you need a little bit of HTML functionality, but you really don't care whether the thing can run a script or not.
You also have some great sidebar, collapsing bar controls and master detail controls. Really, really good stuff. Do you find yourself? Here's a question I have for you. I have found, it's been my experience, that the list box in Windows is actually a really high level construct that's hard to penetrate. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this has been your experience too, but I'm talking about the standard list box. Mm-hmm. If you're writing a Windows app in C, you can create a list box, and it's high level even for the C programmer. So it's very difficult to you can do your own owner draw stuff for the item, but if you wanted to make like it resizable, for example, it's just impossible to do. Have you found that making your own sort of list boxes from scratch is more advantageous than trying to use the one that's there and trying to modify it?
It's a very interesting question. We've had very similar experiences when it comes to using the list box. We still use it for some things, but overall I agree with you. It's very hard to customize that thing. And when we first started to build Milos, we had a lot of discussions internally what we wanted to do about lists, because a lot of people said, the lists we have really don't help us to do what we need to do.
Yeah, and they're kind of critical to
Exactly, they are very critical. They're at the core of what you're doing in a lot of cases when you talk about database applications, right? Yet at the other hand, we thought, writing our own lists, how hard is that really going to be? And then I just kind of set out over a weekend, do it kind of as a hobby little project. And I started to create a class, which we call our list-based class, which has all the logic you need to create lists, including highlighting, grouping, columns, and so forth. Although this class does not do any rendering itself. It just says, okay, now we need to render the next group or something like that. Yeah. And it actually turned out that I could create that class within just a couple of hours. And then I created a subclass thereof that actually did rendering. It looked like a list box. Or a list view.
Right.
And it turned out it actually was not all that hard.
No, it's not that difficult.
We could build something very, very quickly. Now, of course, it got a little trickier once we started to do dynamic column resizing and stuff like that. But overall, doing something in particular that's read-only or just has simple interactivity like checkboxes, I found to be pretty straightforward to do. Of course, once you get into data entry and lists, modifying item titles and stuff like that, it does get a little trickier.
So Markus, we've been talking for the past few minutes, and you mentioned that, it's definitely pretty obvious that you're really into this object-oriented design thing.
That's correct.
And I'm wondering, because in my experience, I've seen a lot of code where it seems like object-oriented design or principles or whatever have really been an afterthought, or even not thought about at all by a lot of developers. Like they understand how to use the concepts in a technical fashion, but not necessarily in like a philosophical way. Like maybe they don't understand what to do with what. So is there like a list of things, of really common mistakes that you see in people's code when they attempt to make use of object orientation? Like things that happen over and over and over again?
Well, the number one problem, I think, is that people try to bend the rules, right? It's along the lines of, oh, yeah, I know this is what I'm supposed to do in object-oriented development, but, who does this kind of thing in the real world? Well, the answer is, if you want to be successful with object-oriented development, you've got to do it the object-oriented way, and that's something that is relatively difficult to learn. It's like saying, how do I program correctly?
Mm-hmm.
It's not really clear cut, but if you stick to a lot of the basic object-oriented rules, such as put the behavior that goes with a certain object into that class, rather than manipulating the object from the outside, then you're probably going to be on the safe side. And I think if people just thought about a few basic principles of object-oriented development, such as encapsulate the data or variables as well as the methods with a certain class rather than doing outside manipulation, I think people could do things a lot better and more straightforward.
That's a good point, because that's exactly what I used to do. When I was getting into VB6 and Java, and I was new to the world of object orientation, I had this habit of creating my classes and then creating centralized manager classes. And I would always be passing my objects in, and I had none of the functionality encapsulated in the objects. And I wasn't really able to reuse them because they weren't these self-contained units that could be, swapped in and out of different applications. It was almost useless.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just recently had somebody who explained the scenario to me that they couldn't make work very well with object-oriented technologies, and what they had is they had objects representing certain items. And, whatever they did with those items doesn't really matter, but one of those item types, one of the classes, was only good for a certain duration of time, and afterwards using it was not valid anymore. So they tried to come up with this elaborate algorithm of going out and looking through memory to find an instance of that object in memory and say, okay, if it is older than X, disable this object, it can't be used anymore. And they had huge problems doing that type of thing, while in reality it's like, if this object expires after a certain time, the object should know about it. This functionality should be in the object, and you wouldn't have problems using it. So if you use it the wrong way, it becomes incredibly difficult. But if you did it right the first time, if you stuck to the main idea of object-oriented development, then it will be pretty straightforward and much, much better in quality than it would be without it.
How many developers are using your framework in-house?
EPS right now is a company that's about 20 people big as far as development staff goes. Actually, just gone down a little bit, doing a little bit of rehiring. So if there's listeners out there who are good in database design and object-oriented development, give us a call. And those people are all using the framework, of course. I mean, it's EPS lives and breathes Milos framework. That's really what it all revolves around.
Right.
And as we said before, it's not really for sale. It's not, at least not as a standalone product. But we do use it for the projects, obviously, that we do for the customers. And those customers,
as you mentioned before, it saved you serious amounts of time when starting a project.
Exactly, not just when we start a project, but the goal really is to say we want to do a project that would take us 3 or 4 years, and we want to be able to do that in 9 months.
Right.
That's kind of the goal. So we have the in-house developers using it, and we also have developers at customer sites using it to working together with us. So I don't really know. It's still relatively new, so I'm not exactly sure how many people we actually have using it.
And you think that you may make parts of this available commercially?
That's a very good question right now. We are definitely thinking about taking some of the tools that go with it, because Milos is not just code, it's also processes and tools. So for instance, we have a class browser that allows us to look at classes similar to what the object browser does, but more in an object-oriented way. So it's more inheritance-based, the way you look at it. And we're actually thinking about making some of that available as freeware, just allowing people to reuse it, because it's not going to hurt us to make that available.
Cool.
And then there's some other parts that we are considering to make available as third-party tools commercially. For instance, we're working on this module that allows us to do advanced 3D data visualization in a full real-time animated fashion. So when let's say you store stuff in your warehouse and you want to actually see where it is, you could use this engine to visually see your warehouse.
You said 3D?
Mm-hmm.
So are you using GDI Plus for that, or are you using something a little fancier? Yeah,
we're actually using DirectX to do that.
Cool.
It's very fascinating stuff, actually. So,
do you have an issue with garbage collection?
Surprisingly not. It's really fairly interesting, because DirectX is normally used in a totally different way, right? Normally DirectX is used in things like games, and in games you run in this tight loop where we constantly re-render the screen. And you're also running in an environment where you really have a fixed set of objects and they stay there. And, you may change properties, but you're not adding a million new objects. So the garbage collector really doesn't have a big reason to kick in at that point. Of course, in our scenario, it's different because we are running in a business app and you could do a million things other than looking at the graphs.
Right.
But we're doing a lot of what we call frame throttling, where rather than saying, oh, let's render as many frames as possible, we specify a target frame rate we are attempting to get to. And we leave the rest of the resources available for the system, and that actually fully takes care of it. The garbage collector kicking in is not really noticeable. Plus, if you walk through your warehouse or you visualize, let's say, a casino floor, and you want to see statistics about the slot machines on that casino floor, well, if that has, a third of a second of a delay in the animation, yeah, you're going to notice it, but it's not going to get you killed in a first-person shooter game.
That's true.
Right. You can probably
not such a big deal.
You can avoid a lot of those GC problems anyway just by scoping your objects a bit wider, can't you? So they have a longer lifetime and they're not going to get picked up as quickly.
Or globally.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
The way our visualization engine works is we basically have a world object that has world objects and lights and animation paths, and that's hierarchical. So other objects have sub-objects. So the objects really can't get finalized, or the main object can't get finalized unless all the other objects are removed. And during, as you walk your world or as you visualize a certain chart, you're really not adding and removing a lot. So It doesn't really happen all that much.
Yeah, so obviously we're touching on garbage collection, which goes hand in hand with object-oriented design and good design processes and things. How important is garbage collection as a topic that .NET developers need to? I mean, how critical is it that .NET developers need to understand garbage collection in an object-oriented world?
I think it's fairly important because the way garbage collection works in .NET, for one, is great, right? It solves a lot of problems that we've had in the past, especially with reference counting. And I don't think developers really need to know exactly when garbage collection happens and how it happens and what gets marked for collection and so forth. But I think it's very important for developers to understand when their destructure fires and how they clean stuff up, because that's a fairly common technique in object-oriented development, is to put things into the finalizer. Well, in .NET that may not be such a good idea, so we have an implementation detail that competes with an architectural decision, and people should definitely know about that, know how to use disposable.
Yeah, and just as a tip for C# programmers out there, you should use the using clause. Right?
Yep.
And anytime you're going to create a variable or an object variable on the stack, meaning a scoped variable inside of a sub or a function or a method or a member, when you create that, use a using block. And at the end of that using block, the object will be disposed. And for Visual Basic programmers, it means if you dim a new object inside a button click or a sub or function, and it has a dispose method, call that dispose method before you exit the sub. And just with that little simple technique, you can really increase the speed and the performance of your application. So there you go. We have a question from Eric Jarby, our old friend in Australia, for Markus. Which one is best, inheriting a control or using message filters to modify and add extra behavior to the controls? Hence that when a control is sealed, message filters is the only way. Or you could rewrite the control from scratch.
Yeah, that's one of those things that's very hard to answer, right? Because it's the typical consultant answer is it depends.
Right. How much money do you have?
Inheritance is very important because it allows you to do a lot of things very straightforward, and it's actually much, much easier to use than most people think it is. But of course, inheritance is also a somewhat static mechanism. So let's say you want to build let's go back to our text box example. Let's say we want to build a text box that allows autocomplete, so it fills in what we type, and it at the same time allows, let's say, hyperlinks that are underlined in the text box. Well, you have the ability to add that at a subclass, but what if you want a text box that does one or the other? Or what if you now also want to add the hyperlink capabilities to a different object? Well, inheritance really is not that good a mechanism to do that because it's very static. It's only goes in one direction.
Mm-hmm.
And breaking a lot of these things out into behaviors, in my mind, is the better way to go. But, of course, how do you actually add these behaviors? You may be able to use events and delegates to do that type of stuff, but often you may have the first subclass to make an object behavior aware and then allow to add these behavior objects via composition. So often it's a combination of both, unless, of course, you're forced into using behaviors only because the class is sealed or cannot be inherited from.
Right. And that's what he was bringing up. And in that case, is that a preferable method, using the message filter?
I'm not exactly sure what he means by message filter. I assume he talked about tying into the message pump. I think in many ways it's the only way to go, because if the object doesn't already expose hooks or delegates or something like that you can use.
But now you're in unmanaged land, and you have all that to deal with, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then things get tricky. So hopefully Microsoft will go ahead and take some of these classes that seem to be sealed for no particular reason and make them available. But really, there aren't that many. Right, I think tooltips, for instance, if I remember correctly, are sealed. I might be wrong there, but why seal that?
Right. So if anybody wanted to go out and learn quite a bit, I mean, maybe we've got some people out there who are saying, this sounds interesting, but I haven't really thought about this before. I'd like to know more. Do you have any book recommendations or any resource recommendations, anything on good object-oriented development design?
There's a number of books that explain the basics in .NET, how object-oriented development applies to .NET. Unfortunately, it's not a lot of books out there right now, or none that I'm aware of, that really go into the details and how do you really use that, right? I think there's a lot of people out there that say, I understand what inheritance is, yet when you look at their applications, they never use it because they don't really understand why subclassing a phone class makes sense, and it doesn't, right? I mean, how many programmers built a typical phone class that always gets used in examples? And I think there's a lot missing there as far as a book about real good object-oriented development and real-life applications and big scenarios goes. There's a number of magazines, of course, that have good articles on that. Because having my marketing hat on, I need to mention Code Magazine, but
Well, there you go.
A lot of other magazines out there that have good stuff related to object-oriented development.
This is a good time to talk about Code Magazine. How long have you been doing that, and what is it?
Code Magazine is a development magazine for Visual Studio developers, or developers who program on the Microsoft platform primarily. And we started Code Magazine probably four or so years ago. Because we thought the magazine that we wanted to read as a developer who does a lot of business applications, yet doesn't create, let's say, drivers or some real high-level C++ stuff, we didn't feel that there was a good magazine out there that really covered that in a very professional way. So myself and a companion of mine, Rick Strahl, got together and we decided to start Code Magazine as a relatively small effort at the time, focusing on Windows DNA, and it just became very successful, and it grew into its own business. And now Code Magazine has newsstand circulation and is available pretty much worldwide. Many countries, I don't know how many, but probably 15 or 20 or so countries on the newsstand, and it's just become relatively successful. And I think one of the secrets of our success is that we really are software developers that develop software on a day-to-day basis. And we just happened to have a little bit of a background in magazine publishing. And it worked out great.
Well, we'll talk about Code Magazine some more after the break, but it's about that time when we talk about, advertising and pay the bills and listen to a word from our sponsors and some new music from Rory Blythe. So stick around. Do you have a team of Visual Basic 6 developers or Visual Basic developers that you need to now move over to VBNet and ASP.NET? Well, look no further than Franklin's Net, yours truly. I will teach your team how to come up to speed in VBNet and ASP.NET, everything that they need to know. We offer really good hands-on, just absolutely really, really good hands-on classes for VB programmers. We have a lot of testimonials. We have tons of material we could send you if you're looking for results. Go to www.franklins.net and check out the VBNet Masterclass and the ASP.NET Masterclass. I'd also like you to notice that the classes are available remotely. So now you can tune in remotely, staying in your office or your boardroom or your conference room with your team, and just like you're in class. Check it out, www.franklins.net.
Between the ceiling and the floor, terrified to sleep at night. She lie awake until it's light. I know. But oh my God, to be so old. I know. Nothing I can do but let it go and wait. I wanna be an airborne ranger. I wanna lead a life of danger. Hey, all the way. Hey, all the way, yeah. Hey, all the way. Hey, all the way, yeah. I know. But oh my God, to be so old. I know. And nothing I can do but let it go. Hey, all the way. Hey, all the way, yeah. Hey, all the way, yeah. Hey, all the way, yeah.
Hey, Carl Franklin here, giving a shout out to my friends at Data Dynamics. We've talked a lot about Active Reports on this show, and this is no exception. So I'm talking about ActiveReports.net. This is a port of their popular Active Reports program. If you're currently thinking of doing reporting in .net for Windows Forms or web applications, check out Active Reports for .net. Many of my friends in the business use and swear by ActiveReports.net. I use it as well. Now, let me just tell you, to say that the reporting is simple does it an injustice, because it makes you think that it can only do simple things. It can do very powerful things, but you don't have to go through hoops just to set up a simple report. When you create a report, the report exists with your application, okay? It doesn't exist on a server somewhere. All right, we're not talking about enterprise reporting. We're talking about, I have some data, I want to print it out, or I want to show it to the user. PDF format is supported, HTML format is supported. All the great features you'd expect from a reporting engine, drop dead simple, and the best part, it's not going to break the bank. They have a great licensing scheme that's easy to deal with. So check it out at www.datadynamics.com. Now let's get back to our show. That's some sweet guitar right there. All right, we're back. That was a song written by my brother Jay Franklin, who is actually in the Yahoo chat room right now as we speak. And that's at chat.yahoo.com, !room equals .netrocks_live:1. All right, so now's the time in our show, and we do a little segment we like to call the Linux Vulnerability of the Week.
Hello, Mr. Bull. Let's you and me fight.
And what this is not that we don't think Windows has bugs, and we're not pointing fingers. We like Linux, but there are some zealots out there who claim that Linux does not have bugs, does not have vulnerabilities, and Windows does, and Linux is completely immune from them. And to that we say, ha! And this is also, you can think of this as a service we do to the Linux community to keep them aware of the vulnerabilities that they need to be patching. This one came from March 23rd, which was, just a couple days ago. This is in eCartis. Several vulnerabilities were reported. Timo Seranian discovered 2 vulnerabilities in eCartis, a mailing list manager. First one is failure to validate user input could lead to disclosure of mailing list passwords. Yeah, that's
pretty freaky.
That's not a vulnerability. Linux doesn't have problems. And the second one is multiple buffer overflows. And so it goes on to say that we recommend you update your eCartis package and, all the instructions for updating. So that's pretty heinous. I wouldn't want to give my email password to anybody.
Not even mom.
Not even mom. And before we let this one go, we have a specific zealot of the week.
Of the month.
And we encourage everybody to go to his blog just for a laugh. It's Chris Anthony, chrisanth.blogspot.com, who on his blog has a list, 8 reasons not to use Windows. And number 2 reads as follows: Linux is hacker-proof, Windows is not. Windows, on top of viruses, has what's called vulnerabilities, meaning buggy code that can be exploited to let a hacker control your system. Linux, due to its open source nature, does not suffer from this. Linux has no real vulnerabilities, and since Linux has millions of programmers offering code every day, any vulnerabilities, which by the way aren't real, are fixed very quickly,
right?
Such as in hours, unlike Microsoft, which it took them 1 year to fix a vulnerability. I don't even think that's grammatically correct, Chris. But just to show you that you're completely insane, we'd like to read a little news item from news.com.
Sent to us by Jim Blizzard, I think. That's
Jim
the guy
Blizzard
who pointed this out to our attention. He's the arty on the West Coast I hang out with.
The headline is as follows: Server breach likely to delay GNOME, GNOME. The GNOME project said Tuesday, that, and this is last Tuesday, that its servers have apparently been breached, potentially delaying the latest release of its desktop system for Linux. In an email alert sent Tuesday, the managers of the project told developers that they had found evidence indicating that the server hosting gnome.org had been breached. GNOME, and now just to remind you, Linux is hacker-proof. Windows is not. Okay? Just had to come back to that.
Well, maybe they're hosting the GNOME application on Windows servers, Carl. Because that makes sense, right?
Yeah. A member of the GNOME development team said that the next version of the software, GNOME 2.6, will likely be delayed a few days while the project members investigate the breach. The software was scheduled to be released on Monday. Oh, I'm so disappointed, Chris.
Hello, Mr. Bull. Let's you and me fight.
And there you go.
Can I say something about that real quick?
Please.
I just want to say that some people have been wondering why we've been drawing attention to Chris Anthony. And in my opinion, it's because he's the kind of guy who's going to make the real open source people say, hey, shut up. You're making us look like idiots, right? I mean, the arguments are totally out there. People are saying, why are you giving this guy any sort of mind share? And it's because it's partially fun and partially because he's just going to make zealots
He's
look
a parody
bad.
of himself.
Yeah.
So there you go, Chris.
Zealotry is irritating on both sides of the train tracks. And
we just want to say, hey, thanks for listening to the show.
Because Chris is a listener.
He's a listener. That's right. He listens so that he can, keep up on mono, basically. Right. Find out what's missing in mono, apparently. So, Markus, you still there?
I sure am.
All right. We have a question from Philippe. Kratduch, he said, never mind because I'm Czech. Don't even try to pronounce my last name. But I'll try anyway. Kratduchville. Philippe. I'm just trying, Philippe, Hello, Carl and Rory. First, thanks for a great show. Love listening to you and your guests when the week starts here down under. Still haven't managed to get up a listen to you live. Since you'll be talking about WinForms, would you be able to point me to a good resource on WinForms and data binding? And this is why I bring this up here, Markus. Maybe you can. I'm coming from VB6, picking up C#. Nothing against VBNet. Can already hear your comments. And things... Can already hear my comment. Well, we love C# and their developers.
I'm a C# guy.
That's right. We don't hate C#. We love C#. We hate Chris Anthony. And things are quite different. All the samples on the web, and I'm just kidding, Chris. We love you too. All the samples on the web and in books are for simple binding or something like parent-child relationship using grid, fairly basic stuff. I would like to see something like a form with 3 to 4 combos and some text boxes and grids. The selection in the combos gives me a primary key for selecting other information from the database. It sounds very simple and done fairly quickly in VB, ADO, and SQL stored procs. Is there nothing like item data for a combo list box in C# VBNet as far as I can see? I would like to bind the combos to data views. At least that way I could get the display member value member combination. But is this the best way? Should I be looking at data relation? On a scenario where you make a selection in 2 combos, which will filter entries in the 3rd combo. Anyway, keep up the good work. Regards, Philippe. And he says, Carl, don't worry about the pronunciation. My last name is Czech. So, obviously, here's somebody who came from the managed world and thought he knew what binding was and then got into C#. And, what is this binding stuff all about in .NET? You find that's an issue with your guys as well, Markus?
I find that's a very big issue. I think he has a very good point. Unfortunately, I don't have a very good answer for him. But currently, in the Everett or Visual Studio 2003 timeframe, I don't think we really have a good answer for him. I think that data binding currently
it's a bit complex.
Leaves a little bit to be desired. It's not just complex, but it leaves a little bit to be desired.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's quite finished,
Exactly, and WinForms actually is better, right? I mean, in ASP.NET, data binding is mostly a one-way mechanism, which to me doesn't imply binding.
Right.
I think it's going to change. I don't know.
It is going to change.
How much I can say exactly.
No, we can talk about that because we've done demos of ASP.NET. Scott Guthrie talked about it on the show before.
So it is going to change substantially, right?
Yeah.
In Whitby.
Well, in ASP.NET anyway, and I think he was talking about Windows Forms, but in ASP.NET it goes 2-way.
Yeah, and I think it goes the same deal in Windows Forms. It's going to be improved, but right now it's relatively tricky, right? If you have a data set, let's say a strongly typed data set on a form, it's relatively easy to do something with that and hook it up, but it gets quite a bit more difficult if you use non-standard data objects or if you use delayed loading.
Yeah, I've also had weird problems with text boxes and list boxes. When you try to bind those two. Mm-hmm. First of all, I found the documentation for databindings.add is wrong. It's either wrong or it doesn't work. One or the other. But basically, when I bind to a data set, let's say, the help file says to say, and I'm doing this from memory, if I'm going to bind a text box, it would say textbox1.databindings.add, and then you would give the property name, text, in strings, and then the data source, which they provide in the help file as the data set, and then the data member in the data set object, and then in a string that is the data member, which would be table name dot field name. But I found that the only way to get binding to work with text boxes is for the data source to be the data table, and the data member, to be just the name of the field in that table. So there's one little weird thing right there.
Well, and then there's this whole other issue of the binding context not being
That's right.
totally intuitive, right? If you bind two combo boxes to the same thing, you might get unexpected results if you don't know about, binding context, and that you may have to create more than one manually and stuff like that. So, we struggle with that quite a bit. I mean, we're still struggling with some of that in the Milos solution platform. But mainly our answer is we're currently rolling our own.
Well, just to give some more tips of specifically what some of the issues are in there, one that I talk about in my class all the time, and I end up actually creating a text box, a new text box from the base class text box, and you guys probably do this too, is that if you've got like a list box of items and you've got text boxes bound to the same data set, the same data table, let's say, like master detail, you have a list of names. When as you navigate that list, you want the text boxes to change to reflect those values. If you go ahead and change a value in the text box, that value doesn't get committed into the data table until the binding manager is done editing. And it doesn't know that it's done editing until you move off the record with the list box. So what I've done is I've created a subclass of the text box where I hook the on leave protected sub override, and on leave happens when you move off the field, and kind of like lost focus, but it's not system wide. And then what I do is I determine whether there's a binding to the text box, to the text property with the data bindings collection, and if there is, in a try catch that doesn't do anything because it's very, very possible that it could fail, get the binding manager base from that and do an end current edit on it. And that's the kind of stuff you have to look forward to if you're going to be doing any real data binding in .NET. So you guys have, slain that dragon with your Milos framework.
Or at least attempted to. I mean, as always, data binding is also not a trivial issue, right? I mean, if you bind to the same data set across multiple forms and do weird things, which you probably shouldn't anyway, but it does happen, right? I mean, making sure the update works all over the place if you roll your own is non-trivial. So we're still working on that whole issue. And just making it very user-friendly is not that easy either. So...
And we should also mention again that the next version of .NET is really going to improve binding. And it's not really improving it, but it's sort of taking it to its logical conclusion. Doing the kind of stuff that you're doing in the Milos framework, I imagine, and what I was doing. So let's talk about tablets.
Yeah, what are you doing with tablets? I mean, we had a nice talk last night during the pre-show tech check sort of thing, and I was really interested in a lot of what you were saying. So why don't we start at the beginning again? Like, what's going on? What's your tablet world like right now?
Well, tablets are very cool, right? It's one of those things that since I saw my first Star Trek Next Generation show, I always wanted to have one of those because it just makes so much sense to have a little tablet that you can carry around and read stuff and even interact with it in sophisticated ways. Mm-hmm. So when... and I've tried to get tablet-like things for a long time. There were Windows CE devices that were kind of like it, but really, this whole
maybe you took a notebook and ripped the keyboard off.
I ripped the display off and took it with me. It didn't work so well. The whole concept in my mind really took off when Microsoft released their tablet PC OS and specifications.
Yeah.
I mean, the day the first tablet PC became available, I had to have one, and I'm a developer. Development is what gets me excited, and that's what I do with my tablet PC, right? I write for the tablet PC operating system. And I've been writing those applications. I've been writing articles about the subject, and I've been talking at conferences about the subject. And I do find that a lot of people are very interested in tablet PC development, and in my mind, it just makes a lot of sense.
Tablet PCs are cool, and everybody asks me why I don't have one. To tell you the truth, I mean, they're interesting, they're exciting, but I'm really staying on the sidelines on tablet PC development. I know Rory's really into it. He's actually doing Flash animation with the pen on his tablet PC. But I'm sort of waiting for the, either the price to come down or for the features set to increase or, the next wave. I'll probably get one in the next wave.
Well, I think you said a couple of very key things there. For one, waiting for the next wave is a big issue for me too, because right now I have my tablet PC, I have my notebook. The tablet PC has a 1024 display. It doesn't have the amount of memory and hard drive space that I want, so I can run Visual Studio and I can develop Visual Studio applications, but really I don't have as much screen real estate as I want.
Right.
And really debug sessions don't run quite as fast as I want them to either. So it's not a replacement yet for my notebook computer, but I have big hopes that the next generation will solve that problem. And Rory told me yesterday he already has a tablet that has a much higher resolution, so I'll probably look into that shortly.
One of the things about tablets, though, is that they're really user devices. I mean, when I look at mine, I don't really think about it so much, and this is just a personal view.
Device,
yeah, I don't look at it and think I'm going to wait for this to get better for development. In fact, I want it to be worse for development because I feel that at the moment they're too big. They're a little bit too big, they're a little bit too heavy, they're a little bit too feature rich. I'd like to see something like a tablet that's a little bit smaller with a good resolution, but not necessarily something I'd develop on. And that, I think, would increase popularity of these things, making them more appealing to the users.
Markets really that one can cater to, right? I mean, for the user, you're absolutely right. They got to get lighter in particular. Yeah. I don't care about the size that much. I wouldn't mind for my display to be a little bigger than it currently is.
Sure.
Because really the actual display right now on mine, for instance, is smaller than a piece of regular paper. So it could be a tiny bit bigger, but I also want it to be thinner and lighter.
Yeah.
Because, you have a device that's 3.5 pounds or something like that, and it doesn't seem it's very heavy, but if you sit on the couch and hold it up to read an article, you'll notice that 3.5 pounds do get pretty heavy very quickly.
Yeah.
I remember doing my first tablet PC presentation at a conference, and I stood there for 30 minutes with my tablet PC in my hand. And then after 30 minutes, I sat down to do some code samples, and I realized that really my left hand that I used to hold the tablet PC, it just didn't work so well anymore, right? And I could hardly type.
So you're not all built like Arnold Schwarzenegger?
No, not entirely.
Yeah,
I have considered running for the governor of Texas.
Yeah, they are a little heavy. And I was thinking, and this is sort of like I just wanted to take a minute to talk about what I think of tablet PCs in terms of the killer application, right? And size.
You want a keyboard with wings, right?
No. And size and weight definitely fit in here. But when I was using my tablet for the first week, I was running it with Encarta and OneNote, and I was thinking, you know what? The killer application for these things is education.
Yeah.
And I mean everything. I mean kids in elementary school, middle school, high school, college. I probably would not have dropped out of as many schools as I did if I had had something as cool as a tablet PC. I mean, you get OneNote on there, and you have your notebook. You get Encarta on there, and you have your encyclopedia. You have Microsoft Reader on there. So instead of schools having to maintain these huge libraries of old, dusty copies of Huckleberry Finn, you go to Project Gutenberg, download it, and just read it. I mean, these things are incredible. With a little bit more
juice,
with a little bit more savvy, these things would really be absolutely incredible. But anyway, to get back to development, what kind of things are you doing? I know you were talking last night about some low-level stuff.
Well, I actually want to interject here and ask you to, because I think maybe there's some listeners who still haven't got what's different about tablet PC development from regular development. And so, I guess the key is the inking technology. Just before you get into answer Rory's question, which I want to know the answer to too, just tell us briefly about what inking is and how what are the controls that you get?
Well, inking is, of course, the major feature there's two major features in tablet PCs, right? One is they're generally flat, but the big feature from a hardware and software point of view is inking, which means you can use a pen to operate the tablet, and of course you can use the pen to operate the tablet, using the pen as a mouse. But you can do a lot more. Really, the pen replaces mouse and keyboard, and even a little bit more because you can write on the tablet, and then you have handwriting recognition, which really, really works. Unlike handwriting recognition on a PDA, for instance, which I hate. Mm-hmm. But on a tablet, it really works. Plus, you can do other things with the pen. You can perform certain gestures, and not what Carl is thinking right now, but you can.
Hey, I'm not the one with a dirty mind on this show.
Hey, don't look at me.
I'm the class, and Rory's the. Well, anyway.
So basically you can perform certain gestures that tell the tablet PC to do something. Like you can perform a gesture that starts a copy and paste operation. And all of that, the API exposes all of that, so you can program that. So you can introduce your own gestures and your own programs that make something happen. And that whole concept of using a pen really is what opens up a whole new world, because you now operate a PC, and this is very important to know for people. A tablet PC is a fully functional PC, right? It's not a Windows CE device or something like that. It's just like a PC in almost all ways, except you can generally take the display, turn it around, and turn it into a flat device. And, of course, it has the digitizer behind the display, which is the device that actually recognizes where the pen is. And that's the big difference in hardware between a tablet PC and a regular PC. But
and there's also some handwriting recognition that it does, right? Or storing. What does it do, actually? It's not just handwriting recognition, but it'll actually store written text as data, right?
That's correct. So the tablet PC has this data format or this data entity called the ink, the digital ink, which is what you write. And ink is basically vector graphics that are very, very high resolution, much higher than the display can show. I think I don't recall by heart what the specs are, but I think it has to be like at least 4 times higher than screen resolution or something like that.
Wow.
You're planning ahead, yeah.
Yeah.
We're not back to TWIPs, are we?
No.
That's good.
That's really important because handwriting recognition at screen display resolution is really not acceptable. But on a tablet PC, the handwriting recognition API works really, really well, yet at the same time you can store the ink as ink and display as ink. So even though you may be able to recognize something as text, you may still want to show it as handwritten text. And then you can do things like copy and paste operations on ink and, make your text bold or recognize certain subsections of text as actual text. And
yeah, I was actually surprised at how natural it was. When I write using ink, it's actually my handwriting, and it looks like I wrote it on paper, as opposed to the PDA where it's that standard one pressure fits all kind of blocky sort of text. It's really very natural. And you were saying before that the only real difference is that pen. And one thing I like to say is that even though all you're really doing is changing the way you interact with the PC, once you make that change, and this isn't for you so much as it is for the listeners, right, because you already know this, once you make that change, you realize how incredibly cool it is to use the PC in that way. And I can't imagine living without a tablet right now. I just wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where, I couldn't imagine just using a tablet and then just using the pen, but it's just one of those things that it's just extra functionality. Yeah. And you may use your tablet in regular notebook mode or regular PC mode, and then you go into a meeting and you use it as a tablet, and it's just awesome.
When tablet mode makes sense, it's incredibly cool. That's the deal with that. But so one thing I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned that you were into the low-level development, and I was thinking maybe you could answer a question for me. I could probably go into the news groups and figure it out, or I should have, but I'm a little bit lazy, and I like to wait for guests to come on so I can ask them questions. When I'm using the tablet, all right, in regular mouse mode, I've noticed there's a bit of lag, right? As I move the pen around the screen, the stylus around the screen, the cursor lags a bit. But then when I'm in ink mode, it's dead on, and there's no lag at all. Do you have any idea why that is?
I actually can tell you exactly why it is. Basically what happens is when the digitizer samples the pen, it happens at a very, very high sampling rate. I think it's some 111 samplings a second is the minimum that needs to be supported, but it's really much higher in general. While a mouse gets sampled or measured where it is, much, much less often. So I think it's more like, I don't know exactly what it is, but more like 25 times or 30 times a second or something like that. So what happens is when you write with the pen, that pen input comes from a whole different subsystem in the operating system, and it then also translates that down into mouse movements. Now, the other way works as well. You can translate mouse movements into pen movements, so you can do things like develop tablet PC applications on a regular Windows PC.
Right. That's one thing, is that the tablet SDK works on a regular machine.
Yeah. Exactly. But, of course, when you translate that way, then you have a much lower sampling rate and a much lower resolution, and it just really lags, and it's really odd.
It sounds like this is a good platform for Longhorn with its vector graphics and, sort of blurring the lines between different systems of measurement, different scales.
That's exactly right.
I also have a comment from Rob Zelt, who says one of the most amazing must-sees on a tablet PC is searching a page's ink for a phrase or keyword. So, like you said before, when you write some text, it displays it as the text that you drew, but it recognizes the data, it recognizes the words, and then saves those words and associates those words with a document as well, right?
It doesn't save it automatically, but it depends on the application that uses it.
Okay.
But the basic idea of this is when you want to support ink, or when an application supports ink, you can use the inking API, and let's say you have a text box or an edit box, bigger text box area that you want to have inking enabled on. You can just use what's known as an ink collector control or class, and you can point that ink collector at the window handle of that text box, and then you can start using the ink. It's all fully automatic. It just works.
Wow.
And then on that object, on that collector object, there's a member object called ink, and you can just say ink.toString, and it actually gives you the text back.
Oh, sweet.
It's pretty sweet.
That is sweet.
Can I say, too, while we're talking about that the API, for just getting in there and working with it is much simpler than people would expect. It's a lot easier to get into than I think most people would expect. For such a cool feature.
Straightforward.
Yeah, for such a cool feature set, it's really easy to get in there and get going with
Rory,
it.
did you do any development, or were you even alive when they had the old pen computers?
Pen computers?
Yeah. So, see, they're blank stare. Pen computing is nothing new. In fact, they tried to do this stuff back in 1994, 93.
Huh.
With the pen computer, and it was sort of the precursor to the tablet, but as you can imagine...
Even Microsoft did, right? There was Windows for pen computing.
Yeah, we did that at Win Squared, right, Doug? Yeah, Compact.
Wow.
And as you can imagine, the PCs of the day were 386s and 486s or whatever they were, and they just...
Little slow.
Just a little slow. And
Jeff in the sound room
really
wanted me
off.
to mention the koala pad on the C64, which was like the bane of my existence. That thing was so cumbersome.
I was not a Commodore guy.
Yeah,
I remember
wasn't either.
going over to a friend's.
Several.
I remember going over to a friend's house and seeing their Commodore, and when it booted up, you got a BASIC interpreter.
Yeah.
And you had to write a program.
Little scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, one other thing I want to mention regarding the tablet PC stuff for listeners that are really interested in this stuff. Obviously, in a short radio show, we can explain to them how to do tablet PC development, but if they're interested, they can go to our website, either code-magazine.com or eps-cs.com.
Yeah, making sure you put the hyphen in there, or else you'll go to Hustler Magazine.
And we will, we'll leave it up to an exercise to the listener to figure out where they get.
Right.
I actually have another question I wanted to ask you about tablet PC development. Now, given your experience with object orientation and obviously with designing these nice frameworks for WinForms or just .NET in general, have you done anything? Have you created any suites of controls for Ink applications? Because I know that one of the first things I wanted to do was create controls that would make form-based entry easy and natural, right, on the tablet instead of using the standard text box or whatever. Have you done anything along those lines?
Yeah, this is actually an excellent example of why it makes so much sense to use inheritance in object-oriented development, because we wanted to make sure that our Milos platform natively worked with the tablet PC OS. So when you have a text box on a form, we wanted to make sure people can use the pen and do inking. Now, of course, when you do something like that, for listeners that are not familiar with the tablet PC, basically when you want to write somewhere, having some the size of a text box is not all that great, right? You can't really write a heck of a lot in there. So what you'd have to do is you'd have to go through your application and somehow add an ink overlay to every single text box you have in your forms, and then do something whenever the pen, gets anywhere near the text box, and then maybe enable ink recognition on the form's background or something like that. What we did, on the other hand, is we took our text box class that we used all over the place, right? So we had a great place to hook this stuff into, and we added some static functionality to the text box. In other words, functionality that only runs the first time the text box gets instantiated, and even if you instantiate 10,000 text boxes, it'll only run once. And this behavior checks whether the text box runs in a tablet PC OS, and then we track events. So when the stylus, the pen, gets anywhere near the text box, we fade in this little input panel area right over the text box, and you right over it, and as you lift up the pen, the panel fades back out, it recognizes the text and put it back.
So you move the stylus away and it automatically renders that ink as text?
Exactly.
And
so we just use a little timer.
That is awesome.
And we check events, like there's an event that you can use every time the stylus is moved on the on the recognition area. So whenever you lift that up, we say, okay, if you lift it up and
for more than 5 seconds
goes by without you doing anything, we fade away the panel. Now, if you still move over the panel may fade back in, but if you really lifted it up, the panel will go away, and as the panel goes away, it'll do the recognition on the text and stuff it back into the text box.
And now you have one application that is desktop and tablet friendly.
Exactly.
That is so
cool. All we had to change was one text box class, right? You didn't have to go through tens of thousands of text boxes and add that functionality all over the place. And that's really the beauty of object-oriented development, right?
Well, I tell you what, my email address is rory@neapolitan.com, and you can send me the code there. All right.
Actually, the white papers I was referring to that we have on code-magazine.com and eps-cs.com explain how to do some of this stuff.
Sweet.
And it's, of course, content is available for free, so just go there, check it out.
Exactly. I mean, I'm sort of one of these people who just getting into the technology tends to reinvent a lot, so it'll be really cool to see what other people are doing.
Well, we have a surprise for you, Markus. Aaron Goldberg, architect of the tablet PC platform, has called us to say hi. Aaron, are you there?
Cool.
Hi there.
Wow, I can't believe you're gracing our little segment of the internet with your presence here.
Well, no, I just I saw a mention of it on one of the tablet PC community sites, and figured I'd listen in. I just got back last night from giving some talks over at the Mobile Developers Conference in San Francisco. I was taking the morning off. So
wow.
So I actually wanted to call and let people know we are actually having an active beta right now for our new tablet PC update that's codenamed Lone Star. If people want to actually get some of the new functionality and want to see some of it, we've made some big improvements to both the end user and developer parts of the OS.
Wow, great!
And I've been trying to get as many people involved with that as I can. But if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer anything you'd like to know.
So, Aaron, you wouldn't want to send us a tablet PC to check out and
I'll mention that to some folks on the team. We'll see what we can do.
I was just saying that Rory's got one, but I've been holding off.
Sounds like Rory's got probably the M200.
Yeah, I have the M205, and you can pry it from my cold dead hands.
I've got the same model myself.
Yeah.
So.
I want to get one with the chrome on it, so it looks like a 50s Cadillac. Like I want to go to a diner and use it,
Well, I'm more than happy to answer any questions or tell people how to join the beta, whatever you'd like. I've got 5 or 10 minutes here before I'll have to run. But
where can they get in touch with you, Aaron?
Well, we've got actually an email address that they can just email, and we'll get an auto response for instructions on how to join the beta.
Okay.
We haven't updated the email address yet because we've been busily working at getting our MDC conference together. But they can just email tabalpha@microsoft.com. That's TAB alpha@microsoft.com.
Great.
So get an auto response and give them instructions. There's both the new Lone Star OS update is actually part of Windows XP SP2.
Now, did you say WinStar or LinStar?
Lone Star.
The Lone Star update.
Lone Star, LONESTAR.
That's just the code name for it. The official name will probably be Windows XP Tablet PC Edition 2004.
Okay.
It's a free update for all existing tablet users, and when it comes out, of course, all new tablets will come with it. It basically has some great enhancements to the end-user functionality. Specifically, the tablet PC input panel has been greatly improved to allow for pretty much an ideal pen-to-text experience.
Excellent.
So the minute
it is
you try
much better.
You'll notice just how greatly it's been improved.
Yeah, I used Scoble's tablet at a geek dinner, and he had it on his, and it was so much nicer than what's out there now. And what's out there now works, but the new system really sped things up and made it a lot easier.
So do you guys have stuff planned for the Whidbey time frame? or do you have anything you can talk about?
Well, I can tell you we're more bound to the Windows schedule than we are to the Visual Studio schedule.
So you're more looking ahead.
We do work closely with those guys. For Lone Star, we've got some great platform improvements that actually will I won't go into details. You can actually, if you join the beta, there's a webcast I did a couple of weeks ago that you can get instructions on how to view, and I go over all the new features from the platform. But we made some great improvements actually on the input side. We have an entire new object model called the Real-Time Stylus that actually allows you to build custom components for input
sweet.
to basically get at all the data coming right from the digitizer.
Awesome.
And manipulate it, change it, do whatever you want with it. We are focused on delivering lots of new functionality, in the Longhorn time frame, and doing what we can even before that if there's a possibility for release. But I am working very closely with a bunch of the folks on the Woodby team to make sure that we're tied in with them as much as we can.
Excellent. Well, Aaron, thanks for stopping by and telling us about that. The email address is tabalpha@microsoft.com if you want to get on the beta for the next Tablet PC stuff. Thanks. How can I thank you enough? Can we send you a coffee mug?
Sure. Be more than happy.
All right. We'll get your address, get your mailing address. Jeff will get that, or you can email it to us, and we'll send you a cup.
Yeah, thanks a lot for calling. That was cool.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to say, while we're still talking about development on the tablet, we had another question from a reader, Craig Ellis. He's a little confused. Can I do development for my tablet PC with my desktop? And I just wanted to be absolutely clear. You can. You just go and download the tablet PC SDK, and you can do everything on your desktop. And it will use the mouse instead of a stylus. It's not as cool, and you probably won't be able to do everything you want to do because, for example, trying to write text with a mouse is a little tough, but you can learn.
Right.
You can figure out how to get around the SDK and how to develop using that. So it's a good.
Well,
deal.
and you could even get a little external pad, a little digitizer or something like that, which is much cheaper than a tablet.
The Wacom thing.
Yeah, the Wacom
Exactly.
tablets. Yeah.
Because with the mouse, it's really bad.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to be able to test ink recognition while you're trying to simulate the input with the mouse because the mouse input is just so, low res, and it's, if your handwriting is bad without a mouse, it's going to be much worse with one.
So we want to announce at this time that if you know the secret namespace of the week, to go ahead and communicate that to us from our webpage. You can find all the different ways you can communicate. That would be www.franklins.net/call.netrocks. And if you have been listening and you know it, go ahead and send us that now. And we're going to pick a lucky winner at random, and we're going to be sending that winner this week. We're going to be sending a box of Windows Server 2003 Standard Edition with 5 client licenses. We're running out of the big enterprise ones, and that comes compliments of the Microsoft Regional Director Program, where you can find all your regional director needs at MicrosoftRegionalDirectors.com. We encourage you to check out and contact your local regional director.
Marcus, Rob Zelt wants to know, are you going to be entering the $100,000 tablet PC contest?
Thought about it, but no.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure if he's talking about the same contest that I'm thinking about, but Microsoft had this contest for building tablet PC power toys and all kinds of things, and it did tickle my fancy, but
100,000 would be nice.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's at www.doesyourappthinkinginc.com. I guess there's a big 6-figure contest going on, which is pretty cool.
Wow. So, Marcus, who are some of the companies that you've done projects for with tablet development at EPS?
Actually, it's very slow. It's one of those things where you get a lot of interest through it, but it's still a little slow to take off.
We had a comment on the chat line that said, "I love the tablet PC, but trying to convince my boss to go for it is like pulling teeth."
Yeah.
Right, and here's what the problem generally is. It's basically, you said it perfectly. It's like, well, it's kind of cool, but what do I really do with it? And I'll just stay on the sideline until it becomes more mainstream. And that is a way of thinking that a lot of developers have, because for a developer, a tablet PC is not really very natural, right? For a developer, we sit at the desk, or maybe we have a notebook computer on our laps, but in general, a developer works in an environment where you can sit down and work with your computer. While in the wild, of course, there's a lot of people that have jobs where they cannot sit down and use a computer. Yeah. And, of course, all these people probably have a need for a PC-like device, some more powerful than a PDA,
let's just
but
think
some they can carry around.
Yeah,
right?
let's just think of some of the situations in which a tablet PC works really well. I can think of one right off the bat, which is hospitals.
Hospitals is perfect. Trainers. How about you standing in your classroom having a tablet PC, being able to walk around?
Well, and what about real estate? This is another one I've thought about. It would be really nice to have, well, for example, my father's a real estate appraiser, and he wanted to get a PDA so that he could draw diagrams of houses as he walks around them and determines the dimensions and everything, but they're too small, and they just aren't quite accurate enough for him. And a tablet PC app that handled that sort of functionality would make my father a customer, and there's tons of people just like him. Yeah,
how about real estate agents who have all the houses right there?
And they want to have the photos, and they want to have the forms.
Yeah, what they do is they print out
collection.
They print out lists in their office, and then they drive around and stuff. And if there isn't any information that they can get on that list, they're out of luck.
Yeah.
Well, here's an interesting one: clean room.
A what?
A clean room environment.
Oh, okay, where they put together electronic components.
For instance, recently had contact with someone who they had a clean room environment, and they had people that needed to do quality assurance, and they basically needed to walk around and they needed to fill out forms to make sure all the quality and safety procedures were followed correctly. But, of course, they couldn't take a piece of paper and a pen in there. Right? So that I thought was interesting.
My brother Jay is suggesting lawn care and construction companies.
Yeah. Another interesting one is I hear that the San Francisco 49ers are using it to map out plays and strategy for games that they used to fax from the sideline up to the somewhere else in the stadium, and now they're just using tablet PCs and wireless devices.
Yeah. I think one of the general rules can be any place you have somebody going out into the field with a big stack of paper they have to fill out, a tablet PC would be a great replacement for that paper. And
concerts,
great,
for instance. I have a client who runs concerts with tablet PCs where they do all the audio and lighting that they used to just have walkie-talkies and communicate with each other and needed lots and lots of people. Now they just have two guys walking around with a tablet PC.
And does he have like sliders on the tablet that he can use to control?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, they use mostly sliders, so they don't really do much ink recognition, but...
Well, that's interesting because that even gets you thinking about home automation, right? Having like a tablet PC that hooks up to your lighting system, your alarm system, you're this system, you're that system. You could either mount it in a wall or you could actually walk around with it and use the device for whatever purposes.
Have a shopping list.
Yeah, I mean that'd be cool. You're sitting on your couch, you're reading a book in Microsoft Reader, and you bring up your automation app, and you can actually bring up the lights if they're a little bit too dark from where you're sitting. A lot of cool stuff out there that can be done.
Or, how about a police officer? Did you ever see how police officers drive around with the notebooks in there?
Yeah. There's one now, as a matter of fact. I just heard their siren.
And I think for them it would be great, instead of having this big clunky device in the car, they'd have a tablet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It really, the stuff's all over the place. It's just a matter of doing it, I think.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of us developers not generally thinking about these types of things because it's just kind of the opposite of what we do.
I know, I kind of hate even throwing these ideas out.
That's true.
I want to go and do them, but at the same time, I love tablets so much that I want to see them proliferate and flourish, and so maybe if you can get one person thinking, well, wouldn't this be a cool place to use a tablet, then that's a little bit more mind share.
Yeah. And, one of the common misconceptions is that tablet PCs are really very expensive, while in reality, they're not that much more expensive than regular notebooks.
Right.
And the big difference between a tablet PC and a notebook is really the digitizer behind the display. Right. So once that gets produced in bigger quantities, I think the price of that will come down. And then once creating a regular display is not much difference in price from a notebook with the digitizer and the display. Why even build a notebook that doesn't have that functionality built in? And heck, if you never want to use it, don't use it. But it's there just like you have another, you may have a FireWire port on your notebook, but if you don't use it, it really doesn't matter. Well, I think the digitizers will come down in price where it's kind of the same deal. You can just throw them in, and all of a sudden every notebook is going to be pen-enabled.
I got a good point here, and that is that, just because we have the tablet doesn't mean that every application is a candidate for it.
Of course,
somebody just mentioned something that sounds a little ridiculous, and I won't name names, but Here's one, a comment. There are already touchscreens in restaurants. You could carry this tablet and order the food as you take the order. Now, okay, but a waitress gets paid what? How much does it cost the restaurant to have tablet PCs for all their waitresses versus how much money are they making on ham and eggs? You know what I'm saying? So here's a situation where paper works just fine, thank you very much.
Or even on the other hand, you already have a lot of restaurants that have handheld devices, right?
PDAs
so a tablet
make
PC
sense
might
there.
be a little...
PDA might be a better thing there.
But actually, to follow up on that, I've just recently talked to a potential client who's doing a lot in the pizza industry. And they have very sophisticated ways of ordering food, because when you build a pizza, it's not like ordering, the all-American burger, but instead you say, I'm starting out with this and I'm adding the following ingredients.
Right. I know plenty of guys who I know a guy who owns a pizza restaurant where he had a custom application, or he bought an application that's written in VB, that's a touchscreen app specifically for, it's the guy in Ledger. Yeah, he bought this thing that's just for pizza restaurants, and it's a touchscreen thing, and it's exactly what it is. When they call, it's boink, bink, 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 your pizza's in the oven and ready to go.
Yeah, so, for that I could envision using a tablet PC. You could even use it as a tray.
Dual purpose. You can bring your
exactly.
drinks on it.
Well, no, with the tablet PC, though, they are really multi-purpose. In the joking sense about the tray and everything, but also back like when we were talking about the living room scenario where you use it both for your entertainment and for monitoring, like maybe various household functions and items like the lighting, and you get your mail on it at the same time. When I'm using my tablet, I'm usually doing several things at once.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to follow up on one of the things you said. It's a common misconception that the tablet is a touch operating system. A tablet PC is not a touch screen.
Yeah, no touch at all.
It requires an active pen, right?
Exactly. It's actually an electromagnetic digitizer, which is not touch sensitive at all, although it is pressure sensitive. In other words, you can touch it with your fingernail and it'll not react to it. However, it will know how hard you held down on your pen, which is kind of contradictory, but that's the way it is. Yeah. But what makes this very interesting is that since no touch is really required, the digitizer can actually sense the pen as it is in the air over the display. And I've seen some interesting uses for that, where the tablet OS not just senses the pen, but it also senses its orientation. So you can rotate it around its axis, and the tablet PC will know where it is and what direction it is. So you can use it in 3D applications. You can use that pen to rotate something in 3D space, for instance.
Wow,
I don't know if it has a real use, but it's definitely very cool.
That's an interesting idea. I never thought of that before. Yeah. Well, Markus, any last-minute words that you want to impart on our listening audience before we wrap things up here?
Well, I just want to encourage people to go ahead, check out some of these cool object-oriented features, cool Windows form features, all the stuff we've talked about. I want to encourage you to, if you want to do more research, come to our websites. Check out some of the free information we give away.
And there's other sites out there, too, that are obviously
MSDN. And there's other sites out there as well. Yeah.
MSDN, we'll put a link to that, and maybe a couple other places.
Exactly.
Well, at this point, we would like to say goodbye to Markus, and we'd like to announce the winner of the box of Windows Server 2003 Standard Edition with 5 client licenses. It is Jeff Strong. Woohoo!
Bravo!
Congratulations, Jeff.
Bravo!
Yes,
Bravo! Pip, pip.
You are the proud owner of a bouncing baby box. And use it in good health, and you'll have to tell us. You'll have to tell us how you used it, because we want to know. We want to hear your stories, right? All right. Well, on behalf of myself and Rory and Markus and the tablet developers everywhere, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show.
And I got to say, happy birthday to Luke Cutman, who wrote Sharp Reader. It was his birthday a couple days ago.
All right, Luke. Take it easy. We'll see you next time on .NET Rocks.